types of fiction, and how to write them well using Scrivener. Hi, I'm Jeshua. We at Deep Dive Publishers help aspiring authors pen, publish, and promote a best-selling book. In today's video, I'll show you some of the most popular fiction genres and give you a bit of a rundown as to what they are and why they're important, as well as how to go about writing them using Scrivener. At some point in the video, I'm going to give you a little-known secret about genre that might just change how you view writing fiction. Pay attention or else you'll miss it. As Sean Coyne says, or however you say that, in his book Story.Grid, genre is not a four-letter word. As a matter of fact, if you're not writing your fiction in a genre, what are you doing? Unless you're specifically going for literary fiction and you're trying to be seen as someone important and literary, and you're writing poetic prose and all of that stuff, which is great and all, and if that's what you want to do, fantastic. But if you're in this to actually have people who like your stuff and read your stuff and have it be more than maybe a few dozen people, you're going to be working in a genre. That's just how it works. Now, that's not a bad thing. It means that there's a market for what you're writing, which is hopefully one of your priorities. Yes, you want to be artistic and write what you want to write and all of that, but doing that outside of a genre means it's unclassifiable, and if it's unclassifiable, you can't sell it because it has to be classified in order to be put up in a store, and if it's not classifiable, nobody's gonna look at that and say, I want to read that. So for various reasons, you want to do this. Now, inside Story.Grid and in other places, you will find the different things that distinguish these different genres. Some of the main ones, of course, being romance, thriller, horror, science fiction, fantasy, all of these different things. And then, of course, there's different subgenres within each of those. He has divided the genres into content genres, meaning external content and internal content. So you have the action genre and the horror genre and all of these things, and those have external conflict, because no matter what type of story you're telling, there needs to be some form of conflict. Now, of course, within every genre, you can have internal and external conflict. You need to have physical or financial or whatever threats on the outside that the characters are dealing with, but then you also want to have internal problems that they have to deal with, because as we've seen a lot these days, especially with modern superhero movies, perfect characters are boring. That's why in the early stages of, the Marvel-verse and all of that, everyone was so in, because these were flawed people that had problems that they had to deal with. They had character arcs, and that's one of the many reasons why why the superhero movies are finally starting to die off. Now, for the action genre, if you're doing that, there are some staples of that. It is very external. That is one of the genres where you're going to see, more often than not, the least amount of internal development of a character. That's not necessarily true, but that's pretty common. You will definitely have a lot of external conflicts. Man versus man, woman versus woman, all of that, or man versus nature, man versus the state, all of that. Of course, I say man because that's the most common thing. These days it's not as much, so whatever gender your protagonist has versus some form of often violent external conflict is kind of the crux of that. And there are different, beats that have to be hit within that genre. There are different things that are universal to all stories as well as specific things for that. Horror can be quite similar to that, but rather than focusing on the action, 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 there's often a lot more tension, and then when the violence happens, it's usually more brutal, and within that, there's uncanniness, there's usually, because it is horror and is trying to elicit the fear response from the reader, you have often something that's supernatural or, otherworldly, and quite often you don't give the answers to all, or at least all of the answers to what was really going on in, the serial killer's head or in the monster's head, because it was some otherworldly being that was causing all of the damage. In the crime genre, you have different types of crime. Naturally, there's newsroom, there's espionage, there are prisons, there's the caper, you have organized crime, all of these different things, and then you need to pick which of those subgenres you're doing, and then naturally, because of the scope of this video, I can't go into the specifics of what you would be doing in that. And so that's true for, westerns. There's often vengeance or, something of that nature. Gotta seek justice for wrongs done. Thrillers, there's all kinds of different ones. You have serial killer, you have medical, military, political, psychological thrillers, espionage thrillers. I suppose the difference that you would find between an espionage crime story and an espionage thriller is if it's crime based, it's usually going to have some form of the law enforcement are trying to find a mole or something like that. Whereas an espionage thriller, maybe you're following the mole who's trying to not get caught. So it's they can kind of start blending together a little bit. But it's kind of the specifics of what's happening there. And then, as he classified in StoryGrid, you also have the internal genres, which are more focused on what's happening inside a person. And those are much more focused on the internal growth. You have to have a character arc if you're doing an internal genre, because without a character arc, what's the point? And even in the external genres, especially these days, because of what readers and watchers and all of that, people are way more interested in the internal stuff than they used to be. So definitely take these things into consideration, even if you're focusing on an external genre. You will see one or more of these types of changes happen. It will be a worldview change, their perception of life and existence and all of that. Their morality may change. They may think that they were a good person, find out they were a bad person, or start off as a bad person, become a good person, any variation on that. And then, of course, their status in social position, in their job, whatever that might be. That can, that's kind of beginning to lean a bit more, in my opinion, toward external, but it kind of depends on how much outwardly happens versus inwardly happens in order to get them that increase or decrease in status. Because again, you can either go from bottom to top, or you can take someone who's really high up and uppity and then just grind them down into the dirt. That's also very doable. Now you've had a general overview of some options for what you can pick, as well as how much you may or may not want to focus internally on your characters. Now let's go ahead and take a look at how Scrivener can help you write this book. This is the Scrivener editor. This is the project that I have been working with in some of our previous videos, but we're not going to be using this today. What we're going to do is over here under File, we're going to hit New Project and open this little window. This window right here is the first thing you will ever see when you launch Scrivener. This backdrop is just here because I've already been using Scrivener on this machine. So you get all of these different options for what you might want to do if you're writing nonfiction, blank, all of those different things. Right here, we're just going to click fiction, and we're going to go for a novel. You can easily do short story if that's what you're doing, novel with parts. Let's try novel with parts. I've not used that before. Okay, so this is what you would first see when opening up your novel format inside Scrivener. It would give you a little bit of a write-up on how to use it, making changes. Scrivener also, on top of our own videos, Scrivener themselves have, under Help, created a manual. You can open the interactive tutorial. There's all sorts of resources that they provide, as well as other resources that we at Deep Dive Publishers provide, so you can figure out just about anything you'd want to know about Scrivener. And you would go into different parts. This is what's referred to as the corkboard view, so you can see the different sections. You would go into chapter, you can do that here. You're going to be doing all of these types of navigations using the binder, which is this navigation bar on the left-hand side. The editor itself is what you see right here, very straightforward. If you've used any other text editor of the sort, Microsoft Word, Google Docs, all of them set up very much the same way. If you go over here, you can split it. You can Alt-click and split a different way. You can go into up here, the composition mode, and you can get yourself just what you're working on, which can be very nice for focusing. And then, of course, aside from that and your navigation, another form of navigation would be the outliner. So you could actually go up here and have your different chapters, expand them, and then if I wanted to edit some of the information about scene 1, I would just go over here to the inspector at the top right, and then I can write the outline for scene 1. And then you can do the same thing for scene 2, scene 3, chapters, moving on. And another awesome thing about Scrivener is that you don't have to, or at least awesome in my opinion, you don't have to store any of your other external stuff anywhere else. You don't have to have a bunch of different folders inside your computer keeping track of your notes, your research, other things that you've saved in order to reference them later. You can just go down here, your front matter organized right there. But if you have your research, you can simply do that and then click on here. And then with the split view, which I'll close that to clean it up a little bit. With the split view, Alt-click so I can make it vertical. And then over here, I could be referencing scene 1 right in here. And then us saying this is something that was actually relevant for my book, I could be referencing some of my research here and then be working on it here. Then once I'm done referencing it, I can simply select this, close it out, and then I can go into the inspector again and go down to label, give it a whichever color you want to, red to purple, yellow, and I would say let's go with in progress on that one. And then you can click away. Over in the both in the corkboard and the outline, you can see, oh, this thing is yellow and it's in progress, and you can view that information right here in the outliner. Another aspect of Scrivener that can be quite useful is each scene is split up into its own separate piece, which if you were using Docs or Word or anything like that, you'd have to have a separate text document for each chapter in order to do that. But because we're in a single project under Scrivener, if I wanted to go up here, you might notice that this image right here changes. If I'm in a single scene, it's a single page. If I'm up in a folder, it shows 2 pages. And as a matter of fact, if there were different pieces of text, let's see, you would go and you can see that, as a matter of fact, each scene is now selected, and you can view all of it from within here.
Part 1, you can see that, and you can check here.
So if you wanted to, you can very easily take a look at everything that you have going on in one section, or you can go down as far into the weeds as you want if you have chapters and with different scenes and different parts and all of that, and work on individual pieces. Now, at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that I would give you a bit of genre information that might change the way you look at writing fiction. Well, again, according to StoryGrid, and basically any other reputable piece of writing information that you can find out there, the genres really do matter, because as I mentioned before, no one is going to read your book if they don't know what your book is. And the only way for them to know what your book is to have it accurately classified under a genre, under a subgenre. And for a lot of people, including myself for quite a while, that can be a little disheartening, because also they will say that there are certain things within those genres that you must do. Like in action and thriller, there has to be a scene where the protagonist, the hero, is at the mercy of the villain or the antagonist. There is a scene where the villain has seemingly won, and they often will have some kind of monologue or whatever, and that's just a scene that has to be there. And for romance, in order for a story to be classified as romance, not necessarily tragic romance, but for romance, it has to have a happy ending. The couple have to be together at the end. If they're not together happily ever after at the end of the book, it is not classifiably a romance book. And so there's things like that I personally find very frustrating, and those were the types of things that really kept me away for a while of thinking properly about genre. But the thing is, there are other genres that readers want you to do other stuff with. Like for me, writing dark fantasy, I can kind of do whatever, to a certain extent, because that's kind of what's expected in that genre. You know, George R.R. Martin came in with A Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire, and he pioneered that subsection of fantasy where do what's cool, do what you want. Oh, you have a hero rising to the occasion? Crush him down at the, right before victory. You can do that in dark fantasy, grim dark fantasy. You can't do that in classic epic fantasy. So, that's my own experience. I'm certain if you kind of have that same inclination that I do, there are subgenres in your go-to genre, the one you want to work in, there is definitely going to be a subgenre where it is expected for you not to follow those norms. So if you are inclined toward the norms, fantastic. You are already a step ahead of most people who are trying to write in your genre, but if you are not, and you are aware enough of the things that are expected of you, you can play in to those expected sections and then flip it on its head. And because you did it differently, the readership is very happy because that's what they've come to expect from this subgenre. Hopefully you found this information helpful. Hopefully you weren't overwhelmed by the Scrivener section. I have other videos on the channel that go into more depth into different sections, and I'll be uploading more videos as time goes on, so don't worry about that if you feel that wasn't enough information. But hopefully it gave you a sense of how Scrivener could help you. I personally write with Scrivener, and I don't plan on changing that anytime soon. If you want our Be a Better Writer Masterclass and guide with your Scrivener purchase, you can use this link or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment and buy it through there. It helps us out a bit, and you can still get Scrivener with all of its bells and whistles with our guide as well. If you liked the video, go ahead and leave a like. If you have any questions, leave a comment. Subscribe to be notified of future videos. and share with any of your friends or family or whoever who's an aspiring author or already a published author who could use a bit more information in the publishing industry, which is about everybody. In the next video, I'll talk about how your writing life will be so much better using Scrivener. See you next time.